What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to From the Bench. I'm your host, Will Meadows, and today is our Friday episode where we have a lot to talk about. We've been hard and heavy on the basketball because it's basketball season, but today we're going to talk some about basketball and the game that the Vols have this coming Saturday, so tomorrow, against the 5th-ranked Florida Gators coming into the checkered Thompson Bowling Arena. But today we're going to give our pre-spring practice off-season, I guess you'd say, but we're going to have a preseason and a pre-spring practice and a post-spring practice record prediction. But today I'm going to give my pre-spring practice. That's try and say that 5 times fast. Record prediction for the Vols this coming football season. But before we get into anything, make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment of what you think is what your prediction is for the Vols tomorrow at noon against the Florida Gators. And make sure you guys are followed to all of our socials. They are listed below. So without further ado, we're just going to get right into it. The Vols have not recently, it's kind of been a thing, but I got the idea because the football Instagram posted their schedule saying it was go time or whatever. So I was like, why not go ahead and give our pre-spring practice record prediction. And at the end of it, I'm also going to talk about 4 guys that I think that the Vols, not just basic names like Nico needs to play good and Jermod McCoy needs to play good and Joshua Joseph needs to play good. I'm going to kind of handpick some guys that I think that we need to see them have a very productive year if we want to have a college football playoff caliber team, in my opinion, because the schedule's not easy this year. It got harder than it was last year, in my opinion. So we're just going to start it off the bat here. We've got Syracuse at the Mercedes-Benz Dome, the first week of the year. I think the Vols will win this one. If you would have asked me that, 3.5 weeks ago, I would have been very shaky about it. But since Kyle McCord and Aronde Gassidin and some of their best offensive weapons are headed to the NFL this year, I really think that we can beat them. I don't really know who's going to play quarterback for them next season, but I'm pretty confident in our defense and our front seven on both sides of the ball, being able to get pressure and prevent pressure against that ACC defense and ACC offensive line. Like I said, Kyle McCord, their quarterback this past year, set the ACC single-season record in passing yards, the former Ohio State quarterback. So he got a lot better. Obviously he's playing ACC defenses, but the pressure shift, I guess you'd say, the change in pressure on your shoulders of being the Ohio State quarterback and being the Syracuse quarterback is night and day. So, it was cool to see him play a lot better. My buddy who was on here before, Jaden Siebert, thinks Kyle McCord was very good at Ohio State. I think that's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. But that's like one of his hot takes. So I think the Vols will take that one at the Mercedes-Benz Dome in Atlanta and start off the season 1-0. Then in the second week, they have the first home game of the year. They have ETSU. Not going to talk too much about that one. That's a game where you really just – it's almost like it's like practice in front of 100,000 people. So I think they pick up a pretty easy win against ETSU and start off 2-0. And boys, you better buckle up because in the third week of the year, you've got the Bulldogs from Athens at home in Neyland Stadium. Georgia comes to Knoxville the third week of the year, which is so early because we're used to playing them late in the year, especially in the last few years. But they're here, week 1. Gunnar Stockton is going to be the quarterback for them. Georgia's going to have a good defense every time they trot one out on the field. They've got transfers like Zachariah Branch and Noah Smith from Texas A&M, so they really have just reloaded. And their kind of not weak point, but weaker point of a Georgia team was their receivers this past year, and they really just not even reloaded. They just got way better because they struggled there. They struggled with drops this year, and they just got a lot better at that position. And, who wouldn't want to go play for Georgia right now? In my opinion, it's the best program in college football. So I'm going to have to, you'll see this one and another one I'm tossed on, but I'm going to say a loss right there. Drop the 2-1. It's fine. You're not panicking. That's why we expanded the playoffs to 12 teams. You're okay to lose 1 or 2. I think Georgia beats us at home. I just think that defense is too much for us early. Then UAB comes to Neyland, and that's another one like ETSU kind of practice. try and fix what didn't go right against Georgia, move to 3-1. Then you're at Mississippi State in Stark Vegas. Their quarterback Michael Van Buren, who was a solid freshman last year, left. Both of their best receivers left, and Kevin Coleman. And I don't think that's going to be a very close game. I think the Vols kind of roll through this one to move to 1-1 in SEC play. So that has you at what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4-1. Let's mark that down so I don't have to count that every single time. I've got the record sitting right here in front, or the schedule sitting right here in front of me. Then you got a redemption game, and Arkansas comes to Neyland Stadium, and that's another one. Taylon Green is a talented quarterback, but I think that's a get-back game. Like I said, it's a revenge game. It's going to be very hard for Arkansas to come into Neyland Stadium and get a win. So I'm going to move that to 5-1. I think we get the win against the Razorbacks, one that you need after the chaos that happened last year that was one of your rough losses. Then you go to Bryant-Denny Stadium over there in Alabama, and I'm just going to be completely honest. This is another one a little shaky about. I'm going to say win. As ridiculous as it sounds, a Tennessee native, Ty Simpson, will probably be their quarterback. I'm going to say that we win that one. I've got to pick them at some point. I think this is and we say this all the time, especially if you've been following the show since, just football in general, since this show was started. You know how I feel about Josh Heupel on the road. Hopefully, this is the one that gets the monkey off of his back, and you're only as good as your last one. Ohio State was not a pretty scene. Obviously, it was the playoffs, and Neyland North, we all know that chaos that happened, and we had a ton of fans in Columbus, and it didn't go well for us. But I think we win this one. We move to 6-1. The vibes are high in Knoxville, and then you go to your little brother, the University of Kentucky, and you win another one. Their quarterback situation is rough. Brock Vandergriff retired this offseason, so I assume Gavin Wimsatt would be their quarterback, and that's going to move you to 7-1. And everybody's like, hold on now, the Vols are hot. You're 7-1, haven't lost since week 3. You're going into week 10, I guess you'd say, with some bye weeks in there, and you've got Oklahoma at home. And I'm just going to be honest with you guys. It scares me. I'm going to say win because we're at home, but you guys will get familiar with the name John Mateer this season. I'm going to mark that as a win, and that moves you to 8-1. But I'm telling you right now, that could end up being a shootout. They've got themselves a quarterback, the transfer from Washington State, and he is the real deal. He is a dual threat. He was one of 3 quarterbacks in the country this year, along with Riley Leonard and Jalen Milroe. Obviously, if you know me, you know that I don't think Jalen Milroe is very good. But he was one of 3 quarterbacks in the country this year to have 15 passing touchdowns and 15 rushing touchdowns. Now, his passing stats were a lot better than Riley Leonard's and Jalen Milroe. I'll tell you that right now. He was close to 4,000 yards. That dude was slinging it last year. And granted, he didn't have the hardest schedule out there in the Pac-2, I guess you'd call it, with Washington State not moving conferences. But I'm telling you, the Sooners have themselves a quarterback this year, and he's a dark horse for that Heisman if Oklahoma ends up being pretty good. So you're 8-1. Then you got New Mexico State coming. It's your homecoming. It's senior day. Yada, 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 this, that, and the other, and you're 9-1. Now, this is where, in my opinion, it goes downhill. Your second to last game, you head to the Swamp with DJ Lagway and company waiting on you in the teeth of that night game that I assume I assume that game's gonna be at night. It's a rivalry game. It's gonna have a lot of playoff implications because I think Florida's gonna be very good this year, and this is an L. It's hard enough to beat Florida when they're 6-6 good in the Swamp, much less 11-1, 10-2, 9-3 good. So, gonna mark that one as an L. And you're 9-2 with your other little brother, Vanderbilt, coming into town, Diego Pavia. Diego Pavia does not impress me. I know a lot of people are on that hype train. He does not impress me. But Diego Pavia comes into town and takes another whooping, and you're 10-2. And you got to hope and think that would lead to a playoff spot. You never know. You don't know. Obviously, this year they were considering putting some 9-3 teams in. Obviously, they ended up not doing that. with Ole Miss and Alabama and South Carolina, but you never know. There could be more undefeated teams, better Power 5 teams, obviously, out of Power 6, not Power 5, Group of 5 teams who may get a bid over a 10-2 SEC team who's undefeated or 11-1 and has a good win somewhere in there. So who knows? 10-2 is my pre-spring practice record prediction. That might change depending on spring practice. What we see out of spring practice, if there's some injuries, God forbid. I hope that there's not for either team, our team or the 12 that we are going to face. But we will have a post-spring practice as well. Like I said, I saw it on the Tennessee football Instagram, and I was like, I should go ahead and just drop my pre-spring practice. God, I've said that a lot. Pre-spring practice record prediction. So, like I said, I'm going to say or talk about 4 players that I think that the Vols need to see a good bit of production or improvement or that next step out of these guys if we want to see some, or first step because we have one freshman on here. If we want to see a playoff caliber team like we did last year. So the first guy I have on the list is Peyton Lewis, the freshman. Played great against Ohio State. Was probably the lonesome player that played all right. And Nico did all right, I guess. There was not very many bright spots in that Ohio State game. But Peyton Lewis, a very hard runner. He is fast. Like I said, he runs hard. He will be a sophomore this year. And, he's going to be splitting reps with Deshaun Bishop and then also Star Thomas, the recent transfer from Duke. I think he's going to be more of a receiving threat. But I really, for this offense to get opened up, like we've seen in the past how Josh Heupel offenses are, which this offense needs to get more opened up than it was last year, you got to establish the run game and establish it early. You want to be able to get that play action. Oh, my goodness, about knocked the mic over. Goodness me, trying to fake the play action here. Got to be able to get the play action going in order to find some deep balls. Again, we didn't see much of that this year, but we really need to get the run game established. And like I said, Peyton Lewis isn't the only guy. If Peyton Lewis ends up being no good this year, which I don't see that happening, I see him making a very good second year in that leap, that sophomore leap. But you've got Deshaun Bishop, you've got Star Thomas, like I said. I think the run game will be pretty good. Also with transfers, Wendell Moe and Sam Pendleton, that O-line should be pretty solid this year. I hope. I really hope it is because regardless of if the guys this past year were very good, the O-line, they ran block very well. Javonte Spraggins was a good run blocker. Cooper Mays was a good run blocker. So just need to be able to establish the run game early, and Peyton Lewis is going to be a big part of that. A second guy that I have is the oldest guy on this list, Ricky Gibson, the junior. The opposite side of the field to Jermod McCoy. We're really going to have to see a productive year out of him because we know how good Jermod McCoy is, and we know how good Boo Carter is and how good that front seven can be. But Ricky Gibson, if you can, obviously Jermod McCoy is taking away one side of the field. If you can really see some production and improvement out of Ricky Gibson, not saying he was bad this year because he wasn't. He was solid, but if he can take that second step, obviously like I said, he's a junior, but second year of real playing time and take that next step and be able to lock down some receivers in his own right and also work on his tackling, we could see a very good defense. We've got Turrentine up there at safety, and Jordan Thomas will be coming back. So it'll be interesting to see. I would love to see a big step out of Ricky Gibson early next year just because, Jermod McCoy is going to be Jermod McCoy. He was an All-American this year, but I'd really like to see some consistency on that other side of the field of Jermod McCoy. So that's my one of my 2 defensive players. The second one is a sophomore. Some people might be familiar with his name. If you really know the Vols, you do. He was a former 5-star recruit. Jordan Ross was pretty good on special teams this year. Blocked a few punts this year, actually, but Jordan Ross is a lanky, about 6'5", long wingspan. He's a freak athlete. He kind of reminds me of James Pierce, I'm not going to lie. I think he's going to make some big strides this year. I think he could put on some muscle in the offseason. And like I said, he's got all the tools. He's long, he's athletic, he's quick, he's lanky. He's got all the tools. And when you say those traits, it kind of reminds you, like I said, of James Pierce. So if he can put on some muscle and get in that college weight room and on that college diet one more year, I really think that we could see a big year out of the former 5-star Jordan Ross. And the last one, this one's an offense. I had 2 offense, 2 defense, and this one's the freshman. Like I said, we all know the transfers and the people we lost and people we kept, the drama and the transfer portal at the receiver position. But one thing remained was Travis Smith Jr. He was committed to the Vols quite early in relation to the transfer portal, I guess you'd say. And he stuck with us. Big, like 6'3", long frame. He's very, very fast, uber athlete. I think he could get on the field quick. Now, we said the same thing about Mike Matthews last year. He was a 5-star. Mike Matthews is going to be the guy this year, in my opinion. But Travis Smith Jr., we have struggled to put freshmen on the field early, but because the offense is so hard to learn. I've explained this before on this show. Like, on most offenses, you're like told, like, hey, you're going to run a corner route here. In Tennessee's offense, like, you're running your route based on what the coverage is. So, it makes it a little harder. It's a little harder to learn. You got to be able to block to play in Tennessee's offense because there's a lot of RPOs and read options. So I hope to see him on the field early. Again, we're kind of lackluster, top-heavy at the receiver position, so I'd like to see some Travis Smith Jr. early. Just get the ball in his hands. I think he's an explosive athlete, and I think he could be a very key piece to the Vols offense this year. We've seen how good, obviously, I'm not comparing him to these guys, but we've seen how good some freshmen can be this year in the SEC with Ryan Williams and Cam Coleman, and then we all know Jeremiah Smith. Obviously, that's Big Ten, but, Jeremiah Smith is just ridiculous too. So it'd be nice to see a freshman of our own get going quickly. But that is going to wrap it up for not the episode. Sorry, I know I say wrap it up usually at the end, but that's the end of our football section. Now we're going to – goodness, I got the hiccups. I'm so sorry. Transition to our basketball section where we're not going to talk too much about it. We're just going to kind of preview the game. Like we said, it's at noon on ESPN. It's Checker, TBA, and, it's like I said with Arkansas, it's a get-back game for Vol Hoops. You've got the Florida Gators coming home, and it's a get-back game for one of 2 reasons. One, you got to be by 30 by them the first time. Obviously, it was away at Gainesville. It was your first loss of the season. So that's one revenge game aspect of it, but not so much revenge, but this is a must-win. We all know what happened earlier this week with Kentucky. It was not a pretty sight. You've lost to Auburn. You can't lose 3 in a row in the SEC because we're 4-4 in the conference now, and what are we? 4-1 1-3 in our last 4. So really got to kind of bounce back here with a top 5 win on your home court, because obviously Auburn was away, but Kentucky came to you and Florida's coming to you. You got to cash in with one of them. So it's a must-win in my opinion. And if you're not, you drop to 4-5 in the SEC, and some serious question marks start to get raised around the Vols and inside the program as well. Just you got to kind of look in the mirror and be like, well, where do we go from here? But hopefully we don't have to face those problems and look in that mirror, because I hope we win. And I think Rick Barnes is a good coach. I think he's going to make some. I'm sure those guys had a rough couple of practices, but I'd like to see the guys come out firing, not threes if you're not hitting. Jason Gainey and Dubar and Jaslyn here. But you got to be able to hit some shots, and that's something that they haven't done in the last 2 games. So 3 players that I'd really like to see some improvement from or consistency. I'll explain it when I say it, but Jason Gainey, obviously a great few games this year. He's averaging around 11 a game this year, but the last 2 games, man, he has not shot it well at all. He was, 1 of 8 from the three-point line last game. So we need to see Jason Gainey getting back to him, Jordan Gainey, getting back to himself and hitting some threes or just getting into a rhythm, Against Georgia, he was finding his spot in the mid-ranges and just getting to his spots. And when you see one go in, it's a lot easier to see a few more go in. So another one, y'all know how I feel about him. I just whispered his name into the mic, Chaz Lanier. Just would like to see him get going early. And also, because the last 2 games, he's had a not a horrible 2 games against Auburn and against Kentucky, but it's been slow. He had, 3 or 5 or 6 points in the first half against Kentucky. He had, I don't even know if he scored in the first half against Auburn. Got to get some going early and see one go in. You can't start off the game 0-4 every game. And then another one, obviously he's coming off one of his better games of the year, but he's kind of lacked in consistency. I'd like to see Igor Milicic have another good game against Florida. Florida's best players are guards, no doubt about it. Their 3 best players are all guards. So I'd like to see Igor kind of take over. And another one I'd like to see is just some consistency from Felix Akapar on the defensive end. Like I said, I gave him his flowers and his clap it ups as we do on this show. Last episode, he's improved tremendously throughout the year, but I'd like to see him stay on that course, and this is a must-win for the Vols, no doubt about it. And I think we're going to win. But make sure you guys leave your predictions in the comments, and also I want to hear what you guys, if you lose this game, where you start to point the fingers and what do you start to question. But I think that's going to wrap it up really this time. For this Friday edition of From the Bench, make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Thank you guys for watching, and go Vols.